What's up, folks? Welcome to another episode of the 10 Horse Money YouTube channel, Monday night live. Going to be solo for a little while tonight. Ron's just getting off the lake. JB is at the house. He's working on his deck, so he's not going to be able to make it tonight, but we're going to have a good show regardless. We're going to just talk about what's going on out there, some summer patterns and stuff. And I'm just rigging up this little guy. I'm going to talk to Ron about this, but I kind of revisited something that I hadn't done in a while. I've been out there, I've been trying to really utilize live scope a lot lately, trying to learn it, trying to stay mobile and just chase these schooling fish around. And yesterday I was kind of struggling, and I'll bring Ron in to give me a thumb up, Ron, whenever you're ready to come in here. But I was kind of struggling out there, and I'm like, you know what? What do I do when I really need a bite? Gotcha. Okay, Ron's gonna be in about 10 minutes, so that'll work. But I was like, what am I gonna do to get a bite? Because I could not get a bite. And this right here, a little light shaky head, just 1/8 ounce shaky head, throwing it on 8-pound test and a spinning rod. And, you know, sometimes when you're out there and you're kind of struggling, which I was yesterday, it was hot as balls. Wind was blowing, thank God, but it was just like nasty hot. And I couldn't find, there's a couple schools that I've been playing around with, but I was like, I'm gonna like try to find some other schools because I'm tired of beating up on those. And I just idled around for a long time, never could find. I mean, I threw it a few fish and I fished a few points and stuff, but it just wasn't feeling right. Of course, this is in the middle of the day, but when that's going on, you got to go to something that you got confidence on. I was thinking, I'm like, you know, what is something that if I have to get a bite, I've got enough confidence in to slow down with, and that's a shaky head, like an 1/8 ounce shaky head on 8-pound test on a spinning rod. I've been playing around with you guys that are familiar with the channel. I started working with Virtus Jewel rods, and I got several of these Acura series rods, and I've just been kind of testing them out. And I haven't talked a whole lot about them yet because I'm still in kind of the testing phase. But this right here is the 7'2" medium heavy all-purpose rod. And I fish. I love a spinning rod, but I've always been like a 7-foot medium, and this 7-foot medium heavy is. I'm really enjoying it. It's got a ton of power, and I get to really practice a lot with it yesterday, hooking some nice fish. So don't forget about a really light shaky head. And the cool thing about this, like a really light shaky head, I mean, I had a like a Magnum shaky head rigged up too, you know, like a 3/8 ounce shaky head with a big. I see Doug on there talking about the favorite worm, that 7.5 inch crocket gator. I had that big crocket gator worm on there. And that's great for fishing out deep. But that 1/8 ounce, the cool thing about that is a lot of my fish that I caught hit it on the fall. So you're getting a lot of fish right now that are suspended. And that 1/8 ounce shaky head, it just falls really slow and it kind of winds. And I've been fishing the shaky head the last couple of years on a bait caster, which, you know, I still do, like 12-pound tests on a bait caster. Well, you kind of lose that vertical fall on a bait caster. You can kind of, as you cast, you can kind of pull your line up and feed it slack and let it fall, which works. But there's something about an actual spinning rod. You know, when you make that cast and you leave your bell open, it free falls. You give it slack and it free falls. And it actually lets that 1/8 ounce shaky head do its thing. It's like a slow kind of, it just kind of looks a lot more natural. And I got probably half of the bites I got were suspended fish. You know, a couple of them I was looking at on live scope. I was just fishing though. Most of it was just casting to wood and just likely areas outside grass lines, things like that. But it was cool to pick up something that I hadn't fished a whole lot in the last couple of years. Over on Egypt in the wintertime, that 1/8 ounce shaky head when the water's cold is very, very deadly, and it works in the summertime over there as well. And, you know, you kind of get away from things. There's so many different lures to try, and there's going to be even more stuff coming up because iCast is getting ready to drop when is that? July 11th, I think it is. So we're going to be bombarded with a bunch of new stuff that we want to try. But sometimes the old standbys are the way to go. And I know Ron is, he's got a couple baits that he's caught fish on for years and years and years. And it's some of his summer baits that he loves to fish. And we'll probably talk about that here in a second. I want to go ahead and bring Ron in. I see him in the background. So we will bring him in. What's going on, buddy?
What's going on, man? How are you?
I'm doing good. Put in a 10-hour day at work after being off for a whole week, and I survived.
I didn't know
it was nice, man. It was nice being off. I mean, I've been working on the house and getting it all ready to go, but it was just nice having a whole week off. I've had a nice little stint of vacations the last couple months, and I pretty much burned up all my leave now. So I'm going to be working.
How close are you to being in the new house?
Well, we're really close. We've got 4th of July weekend coming up. So I've got Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday off. And I think Sunday we're going to move the necessities that we're using right now into the other house. So I think Sunday night may be our first night that we actually stay in the new house. We're kind of waiting for the Spectrum to get out there and hook up internet and the TV and that kind of stuff. Because the kids got to have internet or Wi-Fi, or they'll go absolutely nuts. I can do it. I can do it.
You kind of need it for your YouTube stuff too.
I do. It's kind of important. So this may be the last actual live stream from this house.
Wow, pretty cool.
Yeah. So this is a monumental moment.
They just put fiber optics in my neighborhood, and they've been out once to mark where they're going to run to hook it up to the house. So hopefully another month or so, I'll actually be connected to the real world in the right way. My internet here is iffy at best, but so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, they've run that Circle Fiber. It's a brand, the company is called Circle, but they run the Circle Fiber kind of in the middle of Jackson, but it hasn't made it out this far out. And hopefully sometime we'll get that. Because I don't like Spectrum. They have really good internet, but I don't know, they're one of those companies. They've been better the last couple of years, but there for a while they keep on raising their bill like a couple dollars every 6 months, and it drives me absolutely nuts. But I understand it's a business.
That's kind of true everywhere, unfortunately, but
it is. So I asked a question. What's your favorite? Go ahead.
Sorry. No, I was going to say just like fishing tackle.
Yeah. So let me give a shout out to some people that are in here. What's up, Joe? It's good to see you in here, man. Joe leaves comments on the videos. Craig, what's up? Kansas City Metro here. Did you go to the KC Sports Show this year, Craig? I'm wondering if you ventured on there. I don't know. I'm kind of thinking about maybe going to that and as a guest speaker. They do a lot of like seminars and stuff. I've got the opportunity to do that possibly. But I don't know. It's like a 6-hour drive, so I'm not sure if that's going to happen. What's up, Dave? T. Harris. I think he's got it figured out.
That's my friend right there, apparently.
I think he's got it figured out. You and Ron could be best buds. Sure. That's hilarious.
That's true. Hey. You saw what was on my deck the other day. That's it.
Yep.
You don't need anything.
Todd, Zoom Mag 2. That's another good one. Zoom Mag 2 is
a good one.
Yep. Kind of that 9-inch worm. Here's another power bait, 7-inch worm. My last 2 trips out for me.
Yep.
And then Doug's Crocodigator 7.25 worm on an 1/8 ounce Shaky Head. So really close to what I was just talking about. But the worm I was throwing was a little Zoom Finesse worm.
Yeah.
I ended up breaking that out yesterday and catching some fish on it. Cinco's hard to beat.
Cinco's always good.
Hammy's a fan of the culprit. Man, I haven't thrown a culprit worm in a long time.
Hammy's lying. Hammy's
the
lying.
red shad culprit worm.
That my old partner Dean used to live by that.
Yeah,
red shad. I was an old orchard bait.
I was one night. So this is a long time ago, man. But there's a little local lake called Lake Gerardo that's about 30 minutes from the house. That's about 25 minutes from the house, and it's about 160 acres, maybe. And I was night fishing there one night. Well, I got there a couple hours before dark, and I fished on through till about 10, 11 o'clock. And I mean, I caught a few fish, but once it got dark, I didn't get bit at all. And so I put my boat back on the trailer, and as I was strapping it down and stuff, this guy pulled up in a boat, and he was working night shift, and he had just got off of work, and he was going out and he was going to fish till the sun came up. And I told him, I said, he asked me if the fish were biting, and I said, I don't know. I can't get them to bite. I don't know what I'm doing wrong, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, well, if you want to jump in the boat with me, I've been catching them the last couple of nights pretty good out there. And I was 20, single, had zero responsibilities. So it made no difference what time it was. I didn't really have anywhere to go in the morning. So I said, yeah, sure. So I jumped in the boat with him. And he was throwing a 7-inch red shad culprit worm, shallow, like 0 to 3 feet.
Wow.
On just kind of muddy banks. And we had a really good night. He finally gave me one, and I started catching some fish. But that was that was probably one of the only times where I'd really caught them pretty good on a culprit worm. Of course, I don't throw them a whole lot, but they still work.
It's an old standard. All that stuff is, and there's a reason that it's an old standard. The plastic worm, I Googled this or anything lately, but I think I would venture to say the plastic worm and all of its varieties has probably caught more bass than any other lure combined. I can remember it dates back to, I think, the late 60s. I'm not sure on that, but I can remember throwing it as a kid, the old man's flip tail. I know I threw that in the 70s. And the bass they don't seem to get conditioned to the plastic worm. You can throw a big giant crankbait, or you can throw all sorts of other baits that have a lot of cues to them. And the bass on particular bodies of water will get kind of wise to certain lure categories. But the plastic worm, it seems to avoid all that. Kind of like it just doesn't give off anything negative to the fish. They have a hard time not biting it if you put it in front of them. And I hope it never changes, because I'll have to sell a lot of worms.
Yeah, I think it's funny. I was thinking about this today, actually, and it's got that, like you said, there's nothing about it that gives off an alarm to a fish. There's not a loud rattle in it. It doesn't have a loud thump. It doesn't have a big flash to it. It's real subtle. And when it's falling, if it's a ribbon tail, it has just enough of a little flutter. It's not exaggerated like a paddle tail swim bait. It's just kind of a nice, just a little bit of motion to kind of catch the fish's eye. And it almost looks like maybe a little bait fish kind of swimming down softly. And then when they pick it up, it's soft. Yeah. A lot of the baits nowadays, if you throw a power power worm. It has the scent in it. If you're throwing, you know, max scent, it's got that scent. Strike King, you know, they have the coffee scent in a lot of their soft plastics. There's Spike It markers you can use, Spike It dip, bait fuel. It's just got a nice, you know, it feels right. It feels like an actual critter. It's not a piece of hard plastic. It's not a spoon, you know, that's metal. They typically, they're going to hold on to it when they get it. Your hook point's buried in the worm. You know, if you text pose it, it's buried. And I just think there's no reason for them not to eat it and to ever be conditioned to it. I mean, I'm sure if you're working a school and you're hooking them over and over, eventually they're going to get conditioned to it, but you can probably come right back the next day or a couple of days later and start catching them again on that. And that's why it is a standby.
It's one of those lures, and the older I get, the lazier I get on changing lures. My mind is always, I'm more worried about where they're at. You know, are they in 15 feet of water on points? Are they in the weed? Are they in brush piles? You know, whatever. Where are they at? And the plastic worm is one of the baits that you can pick up that almost no matter where the fish are at that particular day, while it may not be the perfect choice for that day, it's going to get bites if you throw it around where the fish are. It just is. And so it's one of those baits you can just put in your hand, and you don't have to worry about, like if you're pre-fishing or something, you don't have to worry about whether, well, I just went down through this whole area and never got a bite. That means there's probably not a lot of fish there, or the fish just don't want to bite, you know, no matter what you throw at them. So you can kind of eliminate some of that thought process of, you know, because we all have a million rods and reels and tackle box full of everything, and sometimes it can be kind of distracting. And I enjoy worm fishing. I just enjoy it, and it's that time of year right now. It's that time of year.
Well, it's funny after we spoke out there on the water, and I've been, you know, I had like 14 rods in my boat.
That's what you said.
And I really did.
I had about 10, but 9 of them were in the rod box.
Yeah. Well, I guess in my defense, I don't have a rod box, but anyway, I'm always just kind of experimenting and playing around. And like you said earlier, you can get sidetracked and not really, you got too much going on at one time. Cause, you're right. There's usually a strong, solid pattern or two out there. And once you find it, you're going to have your best fishing by just locating fish. Like once you've established kind of what the fish are doing, then it just becomes running around and figuring out what kind of areas the fish are in and the depth and stuff.
Yep.
But not too long after we talked, actually, I just tied it up when we were talking, and that Shaky Head, I got to a spot. And it's funny. It was an area that I hadn't fished in like 3 years over there. And I've thought about it, and I've kind of looked at it from afar. And then yesterday I was in that area and I was chasing some suspending live scope fish, and I got tired of doing that. And I was running out of time, and I really hadn't caught a lot. But I tied that Shaky Head on, and that's something that I can fish really, really slow because I have a ton of confidence in it. It's like you said earlier, if they don't bite that, then they're just not biting. You know, I eliminate it's not a bait thing. It's just, they're just in a negative mood. And I fished really, really slow down this stretch, like this little channel swing stretch that had some laydowns kind of mixed in on it. And, it was fun I hadn't fished that slow in a long time. I hadn't, like, really, really slow. I'm throwing something an 1/8 ounce weight. So I'm actually appealing to some of the fish that are suspended. So you're getting that opportunity, even just on a random cast. The water's really clear. So as that bait's falling really slow, it gives the fish a chance to come over there and grab it. And then when it gets on the bottom, you're still able to fish it slow and drag it around. And like Cajun Rob says, the lighter the weight, the less you get hung up as well, which is very true. So I was getting that advantage, and then it was fun to fish with a 10-pound test. I think I had 10-pound test on there and a spinning rod, just fishing real finessey.
Yeah.
I like to do that. It's something that I tend to do it a lot more in the summertime. But right away I got a bite,
especially with the pressure that Cedar's getting right now.
Exactly. And right away I got bit. I missed a fish. And then I had another one take the worm off of it. And I pulled up on this one little laydown. And it was basically the first laydown. I was on the way home. I was talking to Mike Russell about this. We were just got in a conversation. I was telling him about this laydown, and I started thinking about it. He kind of asked me a few questions about why I thought this laydown was so special. And it was, well, I'll tell you what happened on that laydown first. So I threw looking at it, I threw on the left side of it. I immediately catch a fish. It's like a 2-pounder. I'm like, cool. And this is after going a couple hours of not really getting any bites because I was trying different stuff. And then, so I throw right up against it again, and I catch one. It was a 3.5, 4-pounder. So it was an decent fish, 19-inch or so. On the spinning rod, it was fun.
That's a
bowed
blast.
up. Yeah, I had to keep them out of the treetops. It was awesome.
Yeah.
It was really, really fun. And then I throw over on the other side of the laydown. I hook another 2-pounder. It comes up and throws my worm right by the boat. And then I flip in there again and I catch another 2.5-pounder. And then I flip in there again and I get a bite. But on that one tree, I had, I think, 6 bites on that one tree. And it was amazing. And I got to thinking about it. It was right where the channel bends and goes back out to the main lake. Now there were other laydowns kind of scattered along that, but that was the one that was the sweet spot. I mean, I caught a few fish on the other laydowns, but there was the majority of the fish were right there. And as that channel swung around to the main lake, there was a little bit of a flat right here. So basically off that flat into the creek channel, it was the first laydown right there. So, when I got to thinking about it and I was talking to Mike about it, it made sense why there were more fish on that certain laydown, even though there were other laydowns that looked really similar. It was
particularly the bigger fish.
Yeah, it was that location of that laydown. The wind was blowing just perfect in there. But it was cool to slow down and get some bites on a technique that I should probably have it tied on all the time, but I get sidetracked and start trying out all these other things, and it opened my eyes. It's actually a good suspending fish bait too for looking at them and casting onto them. I caught several using my forward facing sonar. I'd see them in the little grass clumps or on brush, maybe just 20 feet out in front of the boat. And you don't even need forward facing sonar to do this, but you can actually just flip out in front of the boat. And as it was falling, I saw fish would come up and grab it, but it had such a slow fall that they could see it and they'd come up and grab it, and then boom, you catch them. It was a lot of fun. So it was fun to revisit a bait that I'd had a lot of success on in the past and put a pretty good video together and salvage of the day.
So many of these things that we know are good and have been good for a long time, you end up going down a rabbit hole with a couple baits and, for a month or whatever. And then you go back to the old standard and it's like, why did I ever stop doing this?
I know.
Shaky Head's a great example of that. The basics are the basics for a reason. They didn't get to be staples because they don't work. So
speed crawl is another one.
Yeah, speed crawl. And here's the beautiful thing about summer is summer and winter are our 2 most stable periods. Now that we finally got some heat, the weather patterns tend to be stable. The water temperatures tend to be stable. So the fish are going to, in whatever lake you're fishing, the fish are going to do whatever it is they do in that lake, and they're going to do it for 2 or 3 months, and so it's consistent. So you don't, once you get dialed into however your lake fishes, you can just rinse and repeat. And as long as you manage your fish, you got your fish. But it's a wonderful time to fish, and for the very same reasons, that's why winter fishing is so good, because it's stable and the fish set up, and then you can once you figure them out, you can work on them and not have to worry about them going a lot of different places.
JB chiming in. He said, "Welcome to the gun show." He's referring to the sleeveless Tackle Warehouse shirt.
Hey, I'm fresh from the lake, buddy. And I want to give the Lake of Egypt report before we sign off. It was pretty good today. I haven't been out here in a long time because I've been down at Cedar, but Egypt was good today.
Yeah, Kevin. He says, Gabe, haven't seen you use the Spike It pin in recent videos. Still in the boat. I used it yesterday. That's funny. That's another. I'll have a video I don't know, probably be another week and a half before I do it, but I'm going to kind of walk you through my Shaky Head deal. But yeah, that was one of the keys to throwing this little light Shaky Head, was just hitting about 1/4 of an inch of that tail with that chartreuse Spike It pin. And I'm always reminded of that, of why that works. Whenever I see the small bluegill in the grass, you'll see those little 3-inch bluegill swimming around, and they've got a little yellow tip on their tail, like a little bit of chartreuse on their tail. It'll just kind of catch your eyes, and you're like, yeah, that's why I need to be tipping my soft plastics with that little bit of chartreuse, especially if I'm, fishing in the grass or around brush or whatever. It just makes sense, and it adds sense. So, yeah, thanks for bringing that up. And somebody asked if I had a place in the new house for the shows, for a studio. Yeah, I've got an office built, and it's going to be an editing room, live stream room, all that kind of stuff. It's an actual office. It'll take me a little while to figure out how I want to get it decorated, but I do have a room set up. Got a computer desk in there that I've actually got to fix because it got damaged in the move. I've had this computer desk, for like 20 something years, and I've moved it several times, and I've never had any issues. Well, for some other reason, when we got over there to the new house, we were moving it last week, it pulled apart. So I've got to get some of those L brackets and do a little, damage control on it. But yeah, it's going to be cool getting that new editing room set up, and just got to figure out what I want to put on the back wall. Let's see here.
While you're looking through the comments, did you notice, or have you been noticing that clutter line on the graph there at the lake?
Yeah, around 15-ish.
Yeah. And there's like 2 bands. There's like a band at the top of it, and I don't know if it's the beginning of the thermocline. The top of the band is at about 10, and then at 15, there's like the bottom of the band, and it clears up, and then it just gets really grimy at like 18. It's like, looks like pea soup on the graph. It was interesting because today I was on a different lake here at Egypt, and it was totally different as far as the graph looks. But if you turn that gain up on your electronics, that you can eliminate a lot of water by finding that clutter line. And not always, but most of the time, the fish are going to be at or above that clutter line. You can basically eliminate half the lake just by turning on your electronics. Yeah, and it is different from one section of the lake to the other. It is a little different.
It is. You're right, and it'll change day to day. Like if you have a lot of wind blowing down a certain section of the lake, it'll bust that thermocline up, and it'll change it. Aaron says he's been wanting to try big worms in New York. Any chance a 9-inch worm will work on 4 to 6 pounders? Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I tell you what, Aaron, one of the best worms to get is a Zoom Old Monster. Now it's a 10.5-inch worm, but it's not, you got to remember a 10.5
The diameter is
10.5 inch
not that
worm.
big though.
Yeah, right. And a 10.5-inch worm looks big at first until you throw it around a little bit, but it's not uncommon to catch 12-inch fish on a 10.5-inch worm. It's just like it's not uncommon to catch really big fish on a Ned rig. You catch really big, really small fish on a really large worm. It's one of those things where it just balls up, and so don't be scared of throwing a 10.5-inch worm. It's not gonna, you're still gonna catch plenty of like 1.5 pound, 2 pound fish on that bigger worm, and it's gonna appeal to your bigger fish as well.
Helps in dirtier water too, a little bit of better profile sometimes.
Yeah, Darius was catching those smallies. What's your favorite, like on a big worm? What's some of your favorite colors, worm colors?
Man, you'll never ask me back on your show. I'm so boring when it comes to colors. I like blue fleck. I like blue fleck in the daytime. I throw a power worm, basically. I've got all sorts of worms, but I throw a power worm, Berkeley power worm, 90% of the time, whether it's a 7, and it's usually a 7-inch, but I do throw the 10-inch one. Daytime, I like the blue fleck. That seems to work in a lot of different watercolors. And then at night, when I used to fish at night a lot, I would just make that a black worm. Now, here's an interesting thing. And there's a lot of different colors that will work. That's just me. But there is an interesting thing that happens sometimes, and I don't understand it. But there's times they'll get off of that blue fleck, and I'll just say, well, I got my black ones with me. I'll put a black one on, and it's just like it. Maybe there's not a lot of visibility down where I'm fishing, and that black worm helps just throw a silhouette, basically, I think. And that's about as fancy as I get anymore. When it comes to a worm, I'll throw a lot of different color plastics when I get away from a worm, with beaver style bait or a tube or shaky head or whatever. But man, I'm the wrong guy to interview when it comes to colors on worms. It's blue fleck or black, and that's. But what I do focus on, though, I pay a lot of attention. Way more important than color is the size weight you use. The rate of fall can make a huge difference from one day to the next, and it's not consistent. There's times they want that worm falling really fast past them, and it'll trigger a bite, or it'll hit the bottom and it'll make a little thud, and they seem to like that. Or there's other times they want it falling really slow. Then the other thing I do that's probably different than a lot of people. Everyone tries, get away with as big a hook as they can. I try to get away with as small a hook as I can. I was talking about Egypt today. I caught about 40 to 50 fish today on Egypt on a plastic worm. There's a little story behind that. I was fishing schooling fish today. And I'm catching my fish on a number 2 hook. And that's the smaller the hook, the more action your bait will have. And I think that's important, the action of the worm. If you got a big, long, huge hook in it, that's going to take away from the natural action of whatever type of worm you're using, or any bait, really. And the combination of the right weight with a small hook, I really think has been advantageous for me now. And when you hook them on a small hook, they don't come off. They hook the fish a lot better than you would think. I actually watched a video. John Cox was talking about using smaller hooks with his plastics, and that was enough affirmation for me to. I like that smaller hook when I can get away with it. You can't always, but if I can, I do.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Aaron was talking about a 9-inch worm. What size hook would you use in there? I know with like a 7-inch worm, I like a 3/0 most of the time. One of the hooks that I've had good success with is that Gamakatsu Superline EWG. You know, for if you want an EWG, but like the 3/0, it's a heavier hook, but it's just a 3/0. But don't you throw like a straight shank, like a regular worm hook, a traditional?
I throw a straight shank and a standard offset.
Okay.
I don't want a lot of hook away from the worm. To answer that guy's question as far as what size he should throw on a worm, and hook sizes by company are not standardized. So realize that. So you got to kind of look at that. But the width, the circumference of the worm will determine what size hook you can get away with. Like that, the 10-inch Berkeley power worm is a little thicker than the old monster. So I have to use a little bit bigger hook to get that bigger bite, you know, so that it makes sense, so that when you set the hook, the point does come through. So just make sure you have enough bite on your hook to accommodate whatever the circumference of your worm is. And you'll know looking at it, it'll look balanced. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Todd was saying, what hook do you all prefer? Round bend or a wide gap? I use a wide gap a lot, but there's times where I think I probably have lost a couple fish because I didn't have a round gap, you know, just a traditional worm hook.
They're both good hooks and they both have their place. The disadvantage that the wide gaps sometimes have is the point straight at the eye of the hook,
right?
Like on an EWG. So if I use an EWG for any reason, I usually will take the pliers and open that point up a little bit so that it's not pointed straight at the eye of the hook, so that when you set the hook, that hook is coming up into the fish as opposed to just going forward with your hook set. Todd Castledine, speaking of hooks like that, he's endorsing a hook, and I can't remember the name of it. I think it's a Strike King hook, but anyway, long story short, it's made on purpose so that the point is not pointed at it's a wide gap, but it's not pointed at the eye of the hook. So it's not on the same plane. And that should increase your hookup ratios quite a bit.
Yeah. And like you mentioned, color is a strange thing. I've told this before on here, but there was a day where I was fishing the strip pits over there, and I was throwing a Hawgz Custom Bait 6 1/4, just a straight tail worm. And I was throwing watermelon red on a Shaky Head. And I caught 2 really nice fish, you know, like some good solid 4-pounders, just really chunky fish. And they tore that worm up. And I reached, you know, I looked around in my box. I looked around in my my little totes in there, and I couldn't find. I know I had them in there, but I couldn't not find that watermelon red anywhere. I mean, I looked, and you know, you catch 2 fish, and you want to get back in there. You got there's a little group of fish up there on the top of this little rocky area, and you want to get back in there as soon as possible. So I was kind of looking fast, but I just couldn't find it. But I did find the same exact worm in a green pumpkin. Same exact worm. So I was touching the tail of the watermelon red worm with a little bit of that spiked chartreuse. So I did the same thing with that green pumpkin, put it on the same exact head. Nothing changed at all. I fished for 10 or 15 minutes and never got a bite. And I'm like, that is so weird. I know there's fish up there. Those fish bit pretty quick. So that told me that there was more than 2 fish up there, which typically if you get a bite pretty quick and they're aggressive and they're moving off with it, a lot of times there's multiple fish up in this area. So I decided, okay, I put my trolling motor on spot lock, and I'm like, I'm going to have to dump all my tackle out on the floor and find those worms just to see, because it's bugging me. Sometimes you just got to do that. You just got to dump the whole damn thing out and then look through it. And I found that bag. I found that pack of the watermelon red worms. So I hooked this 6 1/4 up on there, dyed the tail, threw back out there, and within 2 casts caught another 4-pounder, and I ended up catching like 3 or 4 fish right there within 10 minutes. They wouldn't touch that green pumpkin. Same head, same chartreuse tail, but as soon as I put that watermelon red on there, for whatever reason, I mean, it was sunny, the wind was blowing a little bit, so there was something about that red sparkle, that red fleck in there that caught their eye, and that's what they wanted. And then there's other times where it makes no difference at all. Just maybe they'll prefer a lighter color over a darker, but you don't have to get so specific as, green pumpkin or watermelon or something. I throw a lot of times, back to that bigger worm color, I throw a plum a lot. Plum's kind of a standard color on that old Monster, color. That Mag 2. Yeah, and then I've seen times where they don't want the plum, but they'll take the plum apple, which has got a little bit of flash, a little bit of glitter in it. When I was talking to Mike Russell last night, he was talking about fishing down somewhere in Alabama, but he started throwing this trailer with some gold fleck in it. And the guy that was fishing the front of the boat, he was out of the back of the boat. He was catching a lot more fish than the guy in the front of the boat was. And they were basically throwing a Texas rig, some kind of creature bait or whatever. But the gold fleck was making a difference that day. So sometimes, like you said, it's you got to change it up if you're not getting bites. And for whatever reason, even going from blue fleck to black or green pumpkin to watermelon or plum to plum apple, it can make a difference.
Yeah. My problem is I'm retired. So I go to the lake, I pull up on my favorite point, I throw my blue fleck worm in the brush pile that I know has been there forever. And if I don't get a bite, I come back the next day. That's my problem, is I don't have to go to work the next day. So I'm like, well, screw you, fish. I'll come back another day when you will bite it. That's my problem, is I get lazy that way. Admittedly lazy that way, because I'm a little stubborn. And I like to, I don't know, I just like to catch them on the old blue fleck worm. And but most of the time it's so basic that most of the time, if you're around them, you're going to catch them anyway. But you are right. Color, there's days when the fish do stuff that's weird that you may never see them do that again, but for whatever reason, one little difference can make all of the difference. And that's fishing.
That weight, you mentioned the amount of weight you put on the Texas rig. Mm-hmm. That is super important. I think that, I remember talking to you a while back about that, and you said you used a lot heavier weight than I'd used. And I've seen that happen several times before with a jig too, where I'm throwing a 3/8 ounce jig and somebody's throwing a half ounce jig, and one will get more bites than the other, even when it's on the bottom. You've eliminated the suspended fish, your bait's been on the bottom for several 20 seconds or something, and for whatever reason they're preferring a certain weight over the other weight. So it's got to be the amount of silt that it's throwing up. It's got to be the sound. Maybe it's giving the bait a different action. So there's definitely something to that on certain days.
Yeah, there's a lot of times I'll have 2 or 3 of the same worms or similar worms rigged up, all with different weights for that reason. And it does make a big difference. You were talking about night fishing earlier. One of the things I used to do when I was coaching, most of my fishing in the summer was at night, because I was on a ball field during the evening or day, or we were traveling travel ball or whatever. So I got my bulk of my fishing in at night. And one of the things we used to do, I'd take a 3/4 or 1 ounce weight and put it in front of just a regular tube, rig Texas style. And we'd throw that at night, and we'd hop it off the bottom, snap it, let it go down. You'd feel it hit the bottom, you know, thunk, you'd feel it. And then you just sit there a second. And then all of a sudden you feel tick and your line would swim off. And so that weight is sometimes that's a little detail that gets kind of brushed aside a little bit, I think. The weight's important.
Yeah, it certainly is. There's a lot of little tricks, and you know, one of the advantages, like you said, you go out and you said you're lazy, you're throwing at the same brush pile, but you're also getting to experiment. Like maybe a certain time that fish will move into that brush pile. You know,
Sure.
if they're not there in the morning, but you come back and you know around lunchtime, maybe they're there,
God,
maybe they're not.
Dude, that is so true. It's worse now actually than it used to be. Because of the fishing pressure, I think these fish move more now, or I think they suspend a lot off the side of stuff more now because of fishing pressure. And it's kind of maddening sometimes because you know they're around there, but or you see them on the forward sonar, but it doesn't. You can't weigh those fish in if they won't bite your lure. And so it can be a frustrating deal these days. That's why stuff like that Shaky Head and all that stuff is important.
Yeah, several people were talking about that Haymaker by Owner. That's that wide gap hook.
Is that
It's
what?
got
Okay, yeah, that's
you know, it doesn't go back down. Yeah.
Yeah, that's and the idea is so that it's not the same plane as the eye of the hook. So when you set the hook, you get some meat.
Look at there. Speak of the devil. Mr. Russell's on there. Hey. We're gonna have Mike on here probably in a couple weeks to talk about some new products. He's in the development with Strike King, product and development, I guess is what you call that with Strike King. So he's an insider in the Strike King line. So he was going to talk about some of the new products that are coming out from Strike King. He'll be going to the iCast. So we may do a before iCast and a after iCast. So
iCast is coming up, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's I want to say July 11th. It's coming up pretty soon.
After the 4th. Okay.
Yeah. So there's a lot of new stuff that's going to be out there. Just kind of the swim baits has been one trend. There's several trends going on right now, but so good to see Mike on here. He always he keeps me awake on my drives back from the lake a lot of times, which is good. Yeah, there is a lot of stuff in the boat that I don't use anymore. I've got some. In fact, I'm really finding this out as I'm moving from this house to the other house. I've got 2 tubs of old plastics that I haven't used and discontinued stuff, and I'm going to have to just throw them away because I know what's going to happen. I'm going to start looking through them and I'm going to start keeping half of it and throwing half of it away, and then I got half as much stuff as I didn't even know I had that stuff in there. I'd forgot about it, so I'm going to be getting half as much more stuff that I really need. I know
time for a yard sale.
Yeah, true. She's digging. What's your favorite point on Cedar? The point of his hook.
No, it's. I saw Stephanie that tournament that we won a week and a half ago or whatever it was. I saw Stephanie down there that day. Actually, I was good to run into her. Now, here's the deal on the points at Cedar right now. I think this is fishing pressure related. As you know, Gabe, that there's, and for the people that aren't around here, this Lake Cedar's got really nice weeds in it. And it's got weeds front the lake to the back of the lake. So they hold fish. They hold fish year round. And so when I learned the lake back in the 80s, the lake really didn't have any weeds. So the transition when the fish moved off the bank in the spring to summer was a lot cleaner because they just didn't have the cover up on the bank to hold them there. Well, now there's weeds everywhere, and so fish live in the weeds year round. It's part of it. So that means less fish out on the points on the stuff that I used to like to fish all the time. So it used to be you could go, whenever you're in that situation, it used to be I could pick out 5 or 6 points and rotate between them. and I'd catch them usually. Now, if I've got an 8-hour tournament, you might need to fish 30 or 40 of them because they're just not out there in numbers, and they never will be because of the weeds. But I still think the better fish tend to get out there sometimes, on average. But anyway, you got to fish a bunch of them, and so really, there's no such thing as a favorite point. I do have ones that I like to check all the time just because they sit in the right places and they tend to collect fish, but it's not a guarantee anymore like it used to be. You got to run a bunch of that stuff in a tournament situation anyway.
There's certain points on that lake that always have fish, and then there's certain points that will have fish for a year or two, and then it seems like the fish don't use them anymore, and then maybe they'll come back and start using them again in a couple of years. And that may be, some of that may be pressure, but there's still points that get pressure that still,
and the fish still go there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
sometimes you can't catch them there though.
They're there, but yeah, they may not bite. They've seen a lot of stuff, but there's points where I've crushed them on, and they just don't use them anymore. I don't know why. You know, it's, of course, I mean, I'm not on the lake every day by any means, but sometimes maybe they only use that point for a couple of weeks, and I hadn't checked it for a month, so maybe they were there and they didn't. But I do know for sure that there's a little milk running points that I check quite often, and I've kind of learned over the last multiple years that they will just quit using a point sometimes, and then they'll come back and use it a couple of years later for whatever reason. Same thing with little stretches of bank. You know, the fish move around. It's a pressure thing, and it's got just as much to do with bait and forage. You know, what's available. The grass changes around from year to year. There's certain areas that really had heavy grass last year that don't have grass. You know, they don't have the grass as thick as, you know, now. So, you know, the lake is a living organism. You know, it's ever evolving and changing. So you got it. That's one of the cool things about fishing is even fishing, you know, a few lakes a lot. You know, say you got a couple lakes that you fish most of the time. Even within those certain lakes, they're still always evolving and changing and constantly moving.
100%.
So we are going to be doing a giveaway here in a little bit. It's going to be for a $25 gift card to Baitworks. And I wanted to invite you guys to check out Baitworks. They're going to be having a really cool 4th of July sale. Got some really good stuff. I heard 25% off Curado reels. It's going to be like a daily thing. Right now they're offering this. They're having a flash sale right now. So if you guys are into the big swim baits, the burrito is a soft plastic bait. They're offering that for $10 off, which is a really good deal. So they're going to be having just little flash sales from here through the 4th of July. I think the main sales are going to start on the 28th.
You got my attention on 25% off Curados.
Yeah, I'm not sure the exact date. So if you haven't liked their Facebook page or the Instagram, I'd highly recommend doing that so you'll get notifications. But just keep your eyes peeled because they're going to be having some really good deals. See what do you miss Mille Lacs? We haven't talked about that.
Oh God,
normally you're up there.
Yeah.
I mean, I know last year was the first year you weren't up there, but
I miss it. I literally about it every day. And my buddies up there are terrible about texting me all the time. Look at this 5-pounder. You know, like, thanks, guys. But, and I'm still getting calls about, and I'm like, no, I'm retired, you know, and yeah, I miss it, but that's a good thing because if I didn't miss it, then that doesn't mean it wasn't such a wonderful experience up there. And I'm glad you got to come up there and get a taste of it. And, but yeah, I miss it. It's it's one of those holy grail bucket list places that any bass fisherman should be at one time. Just and what I have to do, I need to get off my butt. And I need to get some of these other places. I've been to Gunnersville, I've been down to Grand, I've been to the Ozarks, but I need to get out to like St. Clair. I need to get to the St. Lawrence River. I haven't seen some of those waters yet. The Great Lakes. I've actually fished Lake Michigan before it really had much of a smallmouth population, but I have fished it. But I have not fished Superior or Erie, and that's what I need to do. Do some of that. But yes, I missed 70 degrees in a sweatshirt in July, buddy.
Yeah, I know. I was watching. They've been fishing the northern swing in a lot of these tournament circuits and catching smallmouth. And I was thinking about that today, the trip that I was able to go on with you up there and just catching just 4-pound smallmouth. Just
how many times did you say the sentence, "Oh, it's just a 4-pounder"? How many times did you say that in the 3 or 4 days you're up there?
A lot. You get spoiled.
And how long did it take to break your personal best up there?
First day.
Yeah.
I think it was the first day. Yeah.
Yeah. We got off Miramar. And we got off Miramar and we ran towards Big Point on the north end of Mille Lacs. And that stretch there is like a little history. That's the stretch Kevin Van Dam used to fish. He called that the
That was my PB right there. That smallmouth right there. That came from Kentucky Lake, and that was a 4-pound, 8-ounce fish, which is a good smallmouth.
That's a good. But
like you said, within the first half a day, I cracked a 512 on a jerk bait.
On that jerk bait, yeah. Ghost Magic Purple.
Yeah, exactly. Spromic stick. Yeah. And multiple fish over 5. I mean.
Oh, yeah.
I broke that PB 30 times at least. I mean, you lose count, but a lot of 5-pounders. Like you said, it's a super, super special lake.
Yeah, I got to do that for 5 years or whatever it was when I was up there. And then when I guided for the Linders, Ron and L. Linder back in the 80s, I wasn't on Mille Lacs, but I was up north of there about an hour and a half at Leech Lake. And that's another special body of water. So yeah, I miss it. I'll hook up the boat and head back up there, but my priority right now is my grandson. So
yeah,
watching him play ball. I don't get a second chance to do that.
This is a really overlooked pattern, Stephanie, and I'm glad you brought that up. But she says she's found that they like to stay where it's clear, closer to the bank, and then about 3 feet out, basically the inside grass line from the bank. That doesn't get fished as much as the outside grass line or the actual grass itself. So that's a really good pattern, Stephanie, that you got there. That it's not going to get. I know the kayak fishermen fish that inside grass line a lot because they can just paddle up there and get right on the inside grass line and fish down it. But for somebody that's fishing out of a boat with a trolling motor, it's a little bit harder. It's a lot easier to fish the outside grass line because you can line up on it. But that inside grass line, you kind of got to 45 it and fish it in smaller sections. But those fish definitely use that inside grass line, and that's something that I don't fish enough. That I should. I need to start doing that a lot more.
That inside grass, especially early and late in the day, a lot of times you'll see them transition. The weed bed fish will transition through the day, and that inside edge, early or late, can be productive. And then, then if it's matted, which a lot of it isn't right now, but if it's matted, they'll bury under there on a bright sunny day. Or if it's windy, a lot of times if it's windy, that'll make some fish on the outside edge active. There's usually a pattern within that each day that has the chance to change during the day too. But yeah, that inside edge is, like you said, can be overlooked.
David says, what the heck is happening to the coontail and cedar? 80% is dead or dying.
I don't know if I would agree with that. It's not matted over. There's a lot of good weeds offshore that you can. That's one nice thing about the forward-facing sonar. I'm not as good as you, Gabe, as far as looking at a fish, throwing a bait to the fish, watching my lure go down and catching the fish. I'm okay at it, and I'm getting better. But where forward sonar really helps me is target acquisition. Like, where's the outside edge of the weeds? And when you can make a perfect cast every time to the edge of the weeds, there seems to be plenty of weeds, but it is not matted over at all. I think part of what he's seeing is that green filamentous algae that's been on top is dying off. That's dying off. And we also had I think we had a little bit of a turnover a few weeks ago where the lake got really grimy just for a couple days. I think we had a little turnover. And so some of that stuff you're seeing, I think, is a result of that, not so much the actual coontail or more milfoil. I think there's plenty of grass.
Yeah, I would agree with you. There's a lot of grass in the lake. It hasn't matted. It hasn't matted up yet.
No,
it's weird. Like, I remember, I think it was like 4 years ago, by early June, there were really good grass mats on Cedar, like punching. I caught one of the tournaments we won over there, one of those Wednesday nighters. We won it punching in like early part of June. So there were post-spawn fish that we were catching that had already fed up. And it hasn't been like that since.
No.
And it's kind of like we were talking about how the grass goes in different cycles. I don't know what was different that year, why the grass was so far ahead, but for whatever reason, there were already good mats in the beginning of June. Typically, it's like August, like late August is when you start seeing a lot of the really good mats. And I think that's probably
helps, obviously.
Yeah, exactly.
One of the keys on Cedar that it's a water supply. It was built to be a water supply lake for Carbondale. And when typically I start paying attention to the mats when SIU fall semester starts. And the reason for that, now there's not as many kids that go to SIU as there used to be, but you get 20,000 people that basically show up in one weekend and start flushing the toilet. The lake usually drops about 6 inches in 3 or 4 days when the students get back. It's just because there's so many more people using the water supply. So they pull more water out of the lake. And typically August and September are dry times anyway. So it's not like it's being, on a normal year, it's not being replaced with rain. So that's when typically that's usually when the mats get really good. Because number one, the weeds are mature, but then two, the lake usually lowers about 6 inches at the end of August because of all the SIU students.
And then a lot of times, right when it starts getting juicy, we get a nice fall rain and the lake goes up and screws it all up.
Yeah. Yep. But hey, one thing I'd like to bring up.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. One thing I'd like to bring up while you got me on here, I'd be remiss if I didn't say anything to any of the local guys. Well, really anyone listening that fishes tournaments. Every summer there needs to be a little bit of a reminder to take care of your fish when they're in the live well. And it's something everyone knows, but I think people get lazy on it sometimes. And in this heat, it just doesn't take much to kill a fish. Especially when you talk about our John boats, if you're using a built-in live well like I've got. I don't have insulation in my live well. So some guys use coolers, and those are actually better. But take care of your fish. Gene Gillian, the biologist for BASS, recommends lowering your water temperature by roughly 10 degrees. says more than that, you can shock the fish. But lower that water temperature about 10 degrees using ice. Ice mixed with lake water, they claim the chlorine and all that won't have any effect. But the catch and release formula, has stuff in it to offset any of the stuff in the ice anyway. And then run the old aerator. If you got a good battery, it's not going to hurt anything to run that aerator all day. And just make the effort to take care of the fish. I've seen too many fish floating this summer already, quite frankly. And it's some fish are going to die anyway. It just happens. Delayed mortality is part of fishing. But we can minimize it. And the big fish are the most vulnerable and the hardest to replace in the system anyway. So just take the extra effort, take care of those fish. It's kind of satisfying to watch them swim off, and then maybe your son or daughter will be the next one to catch that fish. But if you weigh them in dead, they're not swimming away. So it's just, I genuinely care about the resource that we all enjoy, and I just kind of feel like that reminder is needed every year.
And it also looks bad on the tournament fishermen when somebody shows up Thursday morning.
Get thrown in that group.
Right. And there's a bunch of dead fish floating around. It just looks bad. Another thing I'd add to that is a lot of fish get caught deep this time of the year. And something that we all need to know how to do is actually fizz a fish. Or around here. Yeah. And it's super easy to do. You can watch, there's several good videos out there, but buy a needle kit. You mentioned Gene Gillian. I can't remember who it was.
Barb Elliott.
Yes, she sells those kits. It's something that everybody needs in their boat. It's super easy to do, and it can save that fish. And another thing is, when we are catching those fish, even if there's not a swim bladder issue, they are coming out of a lot cooler water. You catch a fish down 15 foot of water, it's a lot different at 15 feet than it is at 2 feet. So your surface temperature could be 86 on the top, but down there at 15 foot, it could be 10, 15 degrees cooler. So you're already shocking that fish by bringing them up into that heat, and then you throw them in water that's 86 degrees. That fish really doesn't have a chance. So ice is key. G juice is a really good important additive. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I went so far. I had an oxygenator added to my live well in my John boat. I've got one in the big boat, which is kind of standard in a big boat often, but I didn't have an oxygenator in my John boat. So I just recently had an oxygenator added. It doesn't really draw anything off the battery, just water in there, it's on. And then, you run your aerator. And that tournament we won, we had 2 over 5, and we caught them both early. And caught both of our big fish early. And then we're called little fish in and out all day. And we, between the oxygenator, the aerator, and the G juice, and running the bubbler all day, it took when we went to weigh our fish, and it took them like 3 or 4 minutes to get the weight on our fish because they wouldn't sit still. It's like, that's what you want. They were flopping around, and other guys' fish were, I'd say 30% of the fish just looked lifeless, even if they were alive, probably in trouble, even if they swam off.
Did you say something about the South Fork? Did you say something about the South Fork live wells keeping those fish alive?
The South Fork? Yeah. Well, the live well is nothing special. It's just the $3 we spent on ice. I mean, well, that was it. We just kept the aerator on. It's not hard. It's not foolproof. Fish still die in the summer, especially coming out of spawn. When they're post spawn, they're wore out anyway. Just take care of the fish, and that should never be out of style.
Yeah, and you can carry especially if you've got a bigger boat, you can carry an extra cooler just full of ice. And like Keith was saying, add ice throughout the day to keep that temperature down. That goes a long way. Phil, this is a great comment. I wonder about the time spent in the weigh-in bags from the boat to scale. Yeah, there's only maybe a minute or two of oxygen in that water. You got 5 fish in a bag, and you've just got half a bag of water. They're burning through that oxygen, especially
if the water in your live well was crappy to begin with, if you didn't take care of your fish, and then you put them in a bag, and you got the bag sitting on the hot concrete waiting in the weigh-in line.
Yep.
I mean, it's just not a good situation. That all of it can be remedied just with a little. It's no more work to take care of them than it is to not take care of them. So just take care of them. And I don't mean to be lecturing as Uncle Ron, but the fishing's not as good as it used to be in a lot of places because of the fishing pressure and I'm one of them, tournament fishermen put on these lakes.
Yep. Yeah, Chad's got a good point. The kayak fishermen, they bump them, take a picture, throw them back in the lake, catch, weigh, release. Or it's a link thing. They don't even weigh them. So they're not even hanging them by the lips. Something else I want to talk about is the, you've had a lot of experience fishing smallmouth, and the catch, weigh, and release, like the BPT. Have you been following any of that kind of controversy where they were talking about?
I watched Luke Duncan's deal and got
what
they were doing.
We touched on that
about that happened on the Champions Tour too.
Yeah,
which is a circuit up Minnesota, catching the same fish.
Yeah. So, what's your thoughts on that? I mean,
I don't like it. I don't know how you regulate it though. That's the rules are only good if they can be enforced, and that's where a marshal comes in. But long story short, you catch, and you got to experience catching bass off of a bed when we were up there, a smallmouth. It's not hard. It's not hard, and I understand the guy's temptation. He goes and catches a 5 or 6 pound smallie. They go right back to the bed, and you give that fish about 5 minutes, you can go catch it again. It really isn't hard to do. And so, what's to keep a guy from, hey, there's a 5 pounder, and now they're their best 5 count, right? They go catch the same fish 5 times and have 25 pounds.
Yep.
So I don't like that, and I think they need to address the issue. And I don't know what the results have been, but they were investigating that circumstance, and there was a bunch of the anglers there, and I won't name the name, but I only know from being in the circles up north. There is a Elite Series Pro that used to fish. There's a circuit called the Champions Tour, which is run by a fellow by the name of Scott Bonema, and it's a really high end catch, weigh, release. They have marshals in the boat. It's a whole circuit, kind of like MLF. Really, really good circuit. Well, one guy got on a stretch of spawning smallmouth and just went back and forth on the same stretch and caught the same fish over and over and over again. And all those, they say, I wasn't there, so I'm take a grain of salt with what I'm saying, but I was told that all those fish died. That he just kept catching them till they gave up. You know what I mean? And so that's not where we want bass fishing tournaments to go. That's not. There's just something intrinsically I don't agree with in that, and so yeah, I hope and I do think MLF will address that issue. I just don't know how they're gonna really enforce it, because those guys, I mean, it's cutthroat, and they're living in the gray all the time, doing everything they can possibly do to earn a living. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. Seems like a lot of drama in fishing, doesn't it?
Yeah. So people that aren't aware of that rule, There, it's just supposed to be fishing, but you get money involved in anything and it gets cutthroat. Unfortunately, that's just the way it is. But
yeah, you talk to one that's $100 grand.
Yeah, exactly. So the rule is, if you sight fish, you can catch that fish one time per day. But if you're not looking at that fish, you can catch it as many times as you want. So what some of these guys were doing were they practiced. They're putting waypoints on all the smallmouth beds, so they know where the smallmouth beds are. They're casting to this waypoint. The bed's on the left side of a stump or left side of a dock post, or there's a rock pile and it's on the right side of the rock pile. They're casting to their waypoint. They're catching this fish. It weighs 5'2", throwing it back in a couple minutes. Yeah, a couple minutes later, they're either going down the bank and swinging back around later to catch it, or they're actually going up and sight fishing it off the bed. Because they can do that once that day.
Right.
So they've caught that fish twice. And then there was a little bit of drama with some guys catching fish and not showing it to the official that it was caught in the mouth, because any fish that's caught off of a bed when you're sight fishing is supposed to be caught in the mouth, and you're supposed to verify it with the boat official and show them that. So there was some taking off the hook, taking out the hook with their back to the camera and not showing it to the boat official. So there's that drama going on. And like you said, I don't know how you can enforce. Obviously, you can enforce the foul hooking the fish. That needs to be verified every time by the boat official. But
simple.
Yeah, but what they've done, they have those GPS pucks on all their boats, and so if a 5'2" was weighed in, and the GPS signal has that waypoint where that fish was registered on the scale and with the boat official, and then any other time during the day, if that boat makes it back to that same waypoint and weighs in another 5'2", 5'3", 5'4", whatever, they know that fish had been caught twice and most likely was sight fished. If it was, if that waypoint was in 3 feet of water the first time, and then it's in 3 feet of water again, the water visibility is 10 feet. Obviously, they're sight fishing for that fish. Right. So that's some of the data that they're going to be sifting through to find out what kind of fines are going to be issued.
There's a lot of all of this going on, apparently.
Yeah.
And it's that gray area, because in the rules it says if you're not looking at the fish, it's game on, right? So the guy can say, well, your rules say, and it's that gray area, but everyone knows what's going on. I think one thing they could do, I thought after I watched Luke Duncan's thing, I was like, yeah, you could take a hole puncher, like you do on paper, punches a little hole in the paper. You could mark, just like Hammy's saying, you can mark the tail. It won't hurt the fish. Punch a little hole in that fish's tail, and then it's obvious that that fish has been caught.
Yeah, but I mean, after you get like 10 or 12 anglers coming down that bank, it'll look like you're ready for a free ice cream cone temper swirl. There's going to be like 17 punch marks in that fish.
Won't have any fins left. Yeah, I know, but they do need.
We get a free large pizza.
Yeah. 12 punches, you get a free pizza. But the integrity of the sport's really important, and it's if we want the sport to continue to grow, the integrity is important, and so they need to address it, and I think they will. Their business depends on that, so I think they will address it.
Yeah, like Daniel's saying, if they take the hook out without the marshal or camera seeing it, it shouldn't be allowed to weigh in. And James Watson was on the Luke Duncan. That was today, I guess. I was listening to that.
Oh, I didn't see it. I didn't see today's.
Yeah, so there's a newer version of this, and he was talking about. I think it was. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was James Watson and Luke talking about this, but if one of your big fish was caught without, sight fishing, and you didn't show it to the boat official, it should be disallowed from your weigh-in bag, but counted as one of your fish. So if you were entitled to a 5-fish limit and you cheated, and one of those fish was not verified, you only keep 4 fish.
You can only weigh in 4 then?
Yeah, you lose your 5th fish. That's too bad. You don't get to replace it. It's not like
yeah.
you get to throw that fish back and replace it. You just lose. You're just weighing in 4 fish. It's kind of like, it's no different than hockey, where somebody's got to sit in a box for 2 minutes or whatever. You're down to 4 men. You're down to 4 fish.
That's a good idea.
So that
would end
that you got to get stiffer. Like Craig was saying, you have to make the punishment bad enough that these people don't want to cheat.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah, so
I agree.
The good thing is it's going to be a smallmouth fishery most likely during the spawn, because largemouth aren't as easy to catch when they're on the bed.
No, that's totally different. It's night and day, the difference between catching smallmouth on the bed and largemouth. It's I don't ever foresee that being much of an issue with largemouth. I mean, I guess technically it could be, but most of the time, and it's the time of year that they go up north too. They go up there in June, and that's when the majority of those fish are spawning up there, and even in July, if it's if you had any cool weather or anything.
Yeah, and in a lot of these people that were possibly in the wrong doing are fishing right now. There's another tournament going on right now, and
yeah,
it's a mess. It's a mess. I'm sure a lot of these old school guys are, they're just really biting their tongue when they see this kind of stuff happen. There's a lot of guys. It's the integrity thing, like you just spoke about.
Yeah,
it's do the right thing.
Yeah, just do the right thing and never feel bad about it. Never have to worry about it. Just do the right thing. It's a wonderful sport we have. We just need to take care of it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So you mentioned Egypt, Egypt report. What's been going on out there?
Oh, dude, it was a blast. For those that don't live around here, Lake of Egypt is a power plant lake here that, for whatever reason, has 1 million frickin' fish in it.
It does.
And I worry about it every year because it just gets beat to death. 2 or 3 tournaments a weekend from March till May 31st, and they cut it off at Memorial Day. There's no tournaments allowed in the summer. I think that's part of the reason we still have fish in the lake, because there's no tournaments in the summer. So, no, not spoon yet, Hammy. I didn't need to. I was too lazy to tie it on.
He's got it tied on.
So anyway,
I know it's tied on.
So we got a Wednesday nighter coming up at Cedar, so I kind of know what I want to do there. I'm either going to catch them or I'm not. It's no big deal. So let's go to Egypt. I haven't run the big boat. Probably hadn't run the big boat in a month, maybe 3 weeks. Long time. That's not good either. You don't want that gas sitting in there. So let's go run some gas out of the big boat. So I went, put it in, and I didn't put the boat in till 2:30, something like that. And it's Monday, so there's not a bunch of water skiers and stuff out there. And I just ran and thought, well, let's go see if any of these fish are schooled up yet. And damn if I didn't find 2 big schools. Big schools, dude. I'm talking, and you've seen it, so you know what I'm talking about. I'm talking 200 to 300 fish in a school. I'm not exaggerating.
I believe it.
And so I was like, I didn't have any rods ready to go for Egypt. I haven't been there, so I opened up the rod box. I'm like, I don't even know what I got hooked on in here. So I found some fish. I put it on spot lock, and I was like, oh, cool. Here's an underspin. I'll throw that. So I pull an underspin out, a couple other rods, a jig, and you got to have a worm on the deck. It's not fishing in the summer if you have a worm on the deck. So I was like, all right. So I threw this underspin. It was a heavier one. I think it's 3/8, I think. And I was only in about 12 to 15 feet of water. This wasn't deep. I threw that underspin out there as far as I could and let it sink to the bottom. And these fish were on the bottom too, by the way, which makes it a lot easier when you find schooling fish because they're pinned.
Yeah.
I started scrubbing that underspin across the bottom where these fish were, and it was just game on.
Stupid, huh?
It was kind of a pain in the butt because they kept. It's a good pain, but they kept pulling the damn tail apart, and I had a pile of plastics before I knew what happened. I'm like, I'm tired of reaching for those swim baits. Heck with that. So I had a little jig on the deck. I threw that for a while, but it was a muddy bottom where they were sitting, and I think that jig was getting lost in the mud, and they weren't really biting the jig. So I was like, well, screw it. I'm throwing the blue fleck worm, dude. I'm not lying. It was almost every cast for about an hour and a half on this stupid blue fleck worm and those schoolers. I'm like, cool, and had a bulk pack of blue fleck sitting there and just warm on. I got to about 30 or 40 of them. And I was like, I need to leave the school. And they're smaller fish. These are not, in this lake, when you find them like that, they're smaller fish. They're 12 to, I had a couple that would have been 16-inch overs, but nothing big. But it was a blast. So I was like, well, and this is in side scan is so important when you do this. The way the wind was, there was a good wind today, so the boat sat nice and still in the wind, with spot lock on. So I got off to the side of the main pod of fish, and you could just watch your side scan, and you just see them swimming in and out of that side scan at 60 to 80 feet or whatever. And it was just, there was no reason to use forward facing sonar because I wasn't throwing at one fish. I mean, I was throwing at 100 fish.
Yeah.
So I didn't
couldn't miss.
Target. Yeah. It's just like, get the worm on and get it out there. Dude, it was a blast. So I got tired of that. I'm not tired, but I was like, well, okay. So let's go see if I can find another school. I found another one almost as big. And I just started with the worm. I was too lazy to rig the underspin back up. An A rig would have been insane. You'd have been catching 3 or 4 every cast on the A rig.
Yeah.
Wasn't ready for that. And it was just like, then I started clock watching. That's why I texted you like at 10 to 8. I was like, dude, start without me and then let me eat some dinner and then I'll jump on because I just got home. I didn't want to leave.
That's hard to leave when that's going on, man.
Oh, dude, it was a freaking blast. And it just reminded me, I don't know what it is about this particular lake. I don't know why it sets up this way, but it is by far and away got more fish in this lake than our other lakes. They're not the biggest fish. There's bigger fish in the other lakes. But if you like to catch schooling fish, it was just a freaking blast. So I had a good time.
Yeah, it's a unique lake. We've had this conversation before. They do things on Egypt that they don't do on a lot of the other lakes.
And cool. You run to Cedar or another lake or wherever, and I'm going to do this, and that you catch a few, but it's not the same. Hammy, who's been on here commenting, I remember last year, I think it was last winter, he had it broken down like fish per hour. It wasn't like we were catching, he was like 3 fish or 4 fish per hour it was it was a lot of fish. So yeah, it's a good lake for that. And so anyway,
how's the Suzuki, the 250?
The Suzuki is great. And if all goes right, it'll be for sale this fall. They're allowing me to get a Suzuki one a year. And so I'm gonna take advantage of it till they realize how silly they are giving me a motor every year. People at Suzuki are fantastic. So I'll have a 250 for sale without many hours and a 5-year warranty on it this fall. But it's a workhorse. It's not quite as fast as my Mercury was, but it's a workhorse. It doesn't matter how much weight I have in the boat; it runs the same. And it's just, they just don't break. I've been watching a lot of stuff on them, and they just don't break. So I'm really happy with it.
Yeah, it's that motor. The more people find out about it, the more they're going to continue to sell, because it is a very, very solid motor. Like you said, it might not be quite as fast as the Mercury, but I'd argue it's more dependable. It's
Yeah. Well, the data
wow.
says so.
Yeah,
The data
exactly.
says yeah, the data says so. And anyone that has questions about, I'm not a mechanic, so I'm always looking for information. There is a a YouTube channel, podcast, whatever. There is a marina up on La Crosse, Team Marine, up in La Crosse, Wisconsin, and they have a YouTube channel. This marina does, and they're a full service dealer, and they are always comparing all the brands, and they're straight shooters. They've got a really good reputation in this industry. Matter of fact, when Jacob Wheeler came out with that new Icon bass boat, they had this guy from Team Marine come down to their plant and review it, and said, "You say whatever you want about our boat. We want your good word out there." And they trusted that he would like what he would see, and so he's got 2 or 3 videos on that new Icon bass boat, and a tour of the facility, and his honest opinion of this and that. That's a really good resource for anyone that has information if they're thinking about buying a new motor or a new boat or whatever. I was glad I stumbled upon that.
Hammy, you're going to have to put on a few more pounds if you want to put a 250 on the back of
your You're going to need a jack plate, buddy.
Yeah. You're gonna have to fill that RD Outdoors sweatshirt all the way up to the brim
and sit in the front.
Yeah, I think the docks make a big difference, Andy, on Egypt. I mean, that's got to help.
Yeah, it helps. That helps.
That
helps. The area behind the buoys helps. The restricted cove helps. The weeds coming back help. The weeds have come back. That helps a lot. But it's amazing. It just blows me away how many fish are in there.
Yeah, when I saw this comment from Cajun Rob, I automatically thought of Mike Russell. He's talking about the Hybrid Hunter Jr., his game changer. So when Mike's on here, Cajun Rob, jump back on and we will definitely talk about the Hybrid Hunter Jr., because Mike knows quite a bit about that. The shallow version.
I bought some, but I haven't thrown them much. But I know they work. Yeah,
it's a very unique bait. I don't have the shallow, but I've got I guess I'm assuming there's the original smaller one and the bigger one, the larger one. I'm not sure the actual model numbers, but I've got a couple of each, and I've thrown them around. They're different. They definitely have different action. Something that the fish haven't seen. So let's I was going to ask you maybe 1 or 2 more questions, and then we'll do a giveaway, and then we'll shut her down for the evening. But let's just pick 5 baits that you have to have in the summertime.
Summer?
Go out. Yeah. Just like, 5 or 6 baits, whatever, that you're always going to have on the deck of your boat in the summertime, regardless of, of the lake so much. But let's just say Southeast Missouri, Southern Illinois, that range.
I think I'll just start with the Texas rig worm for one. I think that plays everywhere in the country. Wilkins. And I think a jig is a year-round bait that there's days that a jig just will trigger a bite if you're in brush piles or whatever, different profile. I think you need I think a crankbait, specifically this time of year, a big crankbait can be a way that, sometimes in the summertime you find the fish and then you got to figure out how to trigger them. Sometimes maybe a slow bait won't trigger the fish, and you know, big DT 20, man's 20 plus, you know, Strike King, whatever, big crankbait sometimes can be really important in the summertime. I think you got to have something. You got to have probably a top water on there. I did see a few fish busting today. They wasn't a big group of fish, but you know,
what's your favorite top
summertime you'll
water?
find the busting shit. My favorite top water? I think the Zara Spook.
Yeah.
Just kind of, I grew up with that bait and it still works. I think a spook, you know, I think something like that is important this time of year. That'll produce a big fish too. And then you got to have something to play in the shad. If you got a shad body lake, you know, whatever it is, a 1 ounce spinner bait, an A-rig, underspin, scrounger head. I don't know. That can be, you know, whatever works for your app. You got to be able to play in the shad, you know, with suspended fish somehow, some way. If you have that basic setup, you can kind of attack them anywhere. And if you got really heavy weeds, obviously you maybe take that Texas rig worm and replace that with a punching rig, maybe, you know, something like that. But
yeah,
I think that kind of covers the basics.
Hammy was interested to hear more about your dragging and deep crank tactics.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not a secret anymore. I was very fortunate. I'm just old enough where I got in on the beginning of that tactic, really. And I was also very lucky. I had several really good mentors that taught me. You know, we didn't have YouTube or, you know, you had to have someone that you had to go fishing a lot. Then you needed someone who was willing to also share information. And, you know, you had to be careful with the information they gave you. But I can remember catching fish on, it used to be the only big crankbait we had was the Bagley's DB3 was the main one we would throw. And then we threw that in the standing timber a lot, believe it or not. Egypt used to have a lot of standing timber. We'd throw that in the standing timber or drag it across the clay points.
What's up, Rich?
And you had to get that bait on the bottom, and then they came out with the man's 20 plus. So I really got in on it on the man's 20 plus, and won a lot of tournaments on cedar on the man's 20 plus. The whole key on that 20 plus, throw as light a line as you can, or any big crankbait. Throw as light a line as you can and get that bait on the bottom as long as you can. And you want that big crankbait to deflect. That's when you get your bite, when it deflects. You want it to deflect off the stumps or the brush pile or the rocks or whatever it is you're throwing it on. And you want to, once you get the bait down, just don't keep reeling it. Usually kind of Carolina rig the crankbait. So once that bait's on the bottom, you get it on the bottom, you got good contact, and then with your rod tip, just sweep the crankbait without reeling, and through whatever it is you're fishing, then reel back and then sweep through again. So you're basically Carolina rigging that crankbait once you get it down in the good stuff. And when they bite it, they're, you know, they bite it. So, but you got to be able to throw it a long way and get it on the bottom for a long time.
The guns are drawing a lot of attention tonight, Ron. I hope that folks at home are able to focus on the fishing content and not just.
I would have changed if I didn't catch so many fish this evening. And I apologize for the tackle warehouse deal. I know you're with Baitworks, and so I'm respectful.
No, man.
I just literally ran in the house and give me 5 minutes to eat.
I buy from Tackle Warehouse, Omnia, but I always go to Baitworks first. You know, they don't have it all, so you got to shop around. Yeah. see. Josh says, 10, have you ever considered doing a river video or breaking it down? Have I considered? I really haven't. Maybe that's an ideal, something I need to look into. I know any current break, super important on a river. And yeah, there's enough rivers around here. I mean, the Black River and then St. Francis River.
You've got smallmouth over there in those rivers.
Yeah, I mean, there's good wading too. It wouldn't just have to be out of a boat. But that'd be a fun video, man. Fun video.
One of my all-time favorite fishing trips one of my all-time favorite days was on the Upper St. Croix. I don't know much about it. I was only on the river a couple of times, but there's like a dam. I don't know if there's power generated off it, and then there's the lower.
That's a short sleeve t-shirt, right? Not a long sleeve. I think you got to spend $150 to get the long sleeve. Yeah.
Yeah, there's only $50.
Yeah, come on, Hammy.
This t-shirt is only $50.
Quit trying to bust his balls.
But anyway, we had in the fall, on the St. Croix, the smallmouth slowly come down the river towards their wintering holes. And the water was high and the current was just roaring through the river. And I swear to God, we smashed them on flipping with flipping sticks. This is smallmouth. Flipping sticks with 3/4 ounce jigs. Go up and just going down the bank to blow downs, rocks, whatever, anything that would break the current. And just destroyed them. It was catching smallmouth on a flipping stick and setting a hook like you're punching it, whatever.
Really?
It was an absolute blast. And then, it was a unique deal, and we let a buddy of ours know about it. His name's George Little. Used to be the Northern States Ranger rep. He now works for Vexus in the same capacity, I believe. And he got wind of it, and he filmed a show with frickin' Hank Parker, and they went and did the same damn thing that we told them about. And there's a show where they're flipping jigs, and yeah, like they knew what but my cousin James had told George, and so George went with, anyway, but that's a true story. And
they didn't give you a shout out or anything?
Memorable. No, they took all the credit for that pattern. We got nothing. Yeah, but that's all right. But that was when that guy said you ought to film a river thing. Rivers can be fun. Rivers, they're unique, and it's totally can be totally different. Used to fish a Bass World Sports circuit down on the Ohio River out of Golconda before all the Asian carp got in there, and that was a fun circuit. That was a real fun circuit. Yeah,
I've fished the Cumberland and the Tennessee, coming out of the dams there off the Ohio several times.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish we had lithium now, because when that Cumberland's rolling, you can't hold in that current. It's rolling like 5, 6, 7 miles an hour. It's all you can do to just hold somewhere. Yeah, it'll drain your juice. Bad. Yeah, so I mean, I'll touch on some of the things that I'm throwing right now, or throw in the summer, and you kind of hit on some of them, but a Shaky Head is another one that I really feel like you get a lot of bites in the summertime. You can throw that. The lighter stuff you can throw for the suspending fish up shallow, and then the bigger stuff. You can throw a 3/8 ounce or a 1/2 ounce Shaky Head with a big worm. You can put a 10.5 inch old monster on there. You can put a big Cinco. You can put anything you want on a Shaky Head. It's limitless, but a couple different sizes Shaky Heads are going to work. A jig is another thing that I always have on, whether it be a big heavy football jig or something I've been throwing a lot more lately. I got like 5 rods over here, and of course they're doing what they always do, get tangled up. Get these off of here. No, not only a big jig, like a big 1/2 ounce, 3/4 ounce football jig, but something finessey is,
Sure.
there's a lot of fry. I don't know if you noticed that out there, Ron, but you'll see these little clouds of bait. It's fry. It's like these little clouds. They're like too small to even be shad. And I think that's fry. It's shad fry, and it's bluegill fry and stuff out there.
Yeah, it's a lot of it's just on that outside edge of the weeds right now.
Or just
a ton of it
out in the open water, just randomly floating around. So yeah, so something finessey. You're gonna have the bluegill just spawned not too long ago. I guess the first spawn was probably in May, but there's gonna be a lot of 2-inch bluegill here before too long. The shad have spawned. Those shad are gonna start getting, they're gonna be getting a little bit bigger, but still small by any means. But something finessey, little finessey jig. This is a Cumberland Pro little runt finesse jig. It's something they just came out with, I think, last fall, but super small, like a 3/8 ounce or 1/4 ounce. I just got a little baby menace on there. Super small profile, but that kind of goes along with that finesse shaky head deal. Sometimes they want a worm, sometimes they want a jig. And
this time of year, it's all of us are dealing with fishing pressure. So
it's a lot of pressure. Yep. And big fish like little stuff. If, like you said earlier, it's about getting around them. You just gotta find them. And then you mentioned this, but an underspin is my baited choice for these suspending fish, the schooling fish. If you find the fish busting, I mean, you can throw this in there and catch some fish. If you find them set up on a point, if they're high up in the water column, you can, count it down. Or if you've got forward facing sonar, you can figure that out, how deep you need to run it. If they're on the bottom, you can just throw it out and let it sink and just slow roll it along the bottom, scrub it like you're talking about. I like 3.5 to 4-inch swim bait, something smaller. And that's one good way to get a lot of bites, get right in a hurry. And here's another one that doesn't get fished as much as it used to, but I've been catching some pretty good fish on this, and it's a tube. It's kind of I know we've talked about it in the past, and I've did a couple of videos on it recently, but it's one of those baits. It's kind of like a lizard, people don't throw a lizard anymore. A lot of people don't throw a tube anymore.
And it's not like they quit biting a lizard or a tube. They bite them just as well as they ever did.
Something that is another really cool benefit of live scope is to watch how the fish respond to different baits and the way that those baits fall. I've been really paying attention to that. So like yesterday, I was throwing this tube. I was throwing that light shaky head, throwing a heavier shaky head, throwing a jig, throwing an underspin. And then not yesterday, but the last time I went out, I was throwing a spoon too. And you can drop, like these drop baits, you can drop it right on a fish and watch how they react and how the bait falls. And there's something about a tube. Sometimes it has just enough of a different action that they'll let a jig go by. They'll let a shaky head go by, but this tube, for whatever reason, they'll either suck it in or they'll follow it all the way to the bottom. So it's doing something a little different that's getting their attention, especially on these points that get a lot of pressure. You get out there on some of these points, they're obvious main lake points. Everybody's fishing them every day of the week, and they see a ton of stuff. They're not seeing.
You got to do something.
They're not seeing a tube really. So just remember that next time you're out there and you got some tubes, try them. They really get bit. Yeah, Keith's saying a tube is a must-have on Table Rock right now. It's one of those baits that's been good in the past, and it's still good nowadays. And then up shallow, like the other bait that I have a lot of confidence in, is a swim jig. I mean, it's hard to go wrong with a swim jig. This is actually a True Track swim jig by Cumberland Pro Lures. I don't know if they make these anymore, but they made this jig in a little bit heavier size. So this is a 1/2 ounce, and I just got a big, just a Hawgz swim bait on there. But slower on that around the grass line. I'll also throw like the Houdini color in a 1/4 ounce with a rage crawl, something big when I'm fishing really shallow. So, swim jig is, and you can throw this sucker out deep, this 1/2 ounce. You can throw it out same way you'd fish an underspin, just slow roll it out there deep. And They don't see an underspin out deep as much as they do shallow. So that's something a little bit different.
One of that old swim jig, when it gets really, really hot, some of these lakes, Crab Orchard is one. Some of these lakes, the fish actually go shallow in the heat. They'll go on the bank in 6 inches of water because that's the only place they can get any oxygen. Crab, we used to be famous for that. So when it was 100 degrees out, we used to swim a jig all the time on the inside edge or through the middle of the used to be a lot of water willow on crab, and that was lights out. It was a blast, and but it had to be hot. It had to be really hot before those fish would move up there. That swim jig, I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, it's a good one, and you can cover. It's one of those baits where you don't have to drag something really slow.
Yeah.
What's that?
You can do anything with that jig. I mean, you can
swim
it.
Yeah, you can cover a little more water
and
still get bit on it. Man, Phil's breaking out the old school beetle spin. Said he caught a 4.5 on a beetle spin a couple weeks ago. Super finessey. Stephanie's been slow rolling a grub. Yeah, it all works, man. It's just about figuring out what mood the fish are in and getting around the fish.
That old grub's old style. That used to be mainstay for everybody, and everyone got away from it.
I know. I used to catch a lot of fish at Wapapello, flipping a grub.
Yeah,
like a Texas rig grub.
My dad used to throw it all the freaking time. Well, when I first started going to Mille Lacs, the grub was on a rod, one of the rods, all the time, and it just kind of the Ned rig killed the grub, but that grub catches fish, and I got a whole box of them. I never throw them.
Yeah. Do you remember that story about the big muddy monster, like the Sasquatch back in, on the Muddy River over there? I mean, that was a legitimate deal back in I want to say it was like the 80s or something. I mean, you're Southern Illinois guy.
It's got a name for a reason. It goes all the way back to the 70s. I can remember being at my grandparents', I think before high school. Grandpa and Grandma lived in Carbondale. Grandpa worked at the university, and so I'd come down all the time to hunt and fish, and we'd always had our vacations here. But I can remember being in the paper about a report about the big muddy monster, and there's basically a drainage ditch on the west side of Carbondale that runs around. They said that someone saw the big muddy monster and they're knocking trees down and stuff. It's kind of hilarious, but yeah, it's got a name around here. It has for a long time. Someone saw something, or they thought they saw something at one point. It took traction. Maybe it was the same thing that Matt Steffen saw.
It might have been just migrated south for the winter.
Came south for the winter.
Came south for the winter. But that was in the newspapers and on the news and stuff, wasn't it?
It was a big deal. I can remember reading it like, is this real? And people were concerned. It was a real thing. Yeah.
It was funny. I took my daughter Sophia fishing last week, and on the way to Cedar, when it's grown up right now, the road gets narrower on the Pomona side. And
going into the ramp.
Yeah. And it was later in the day, and the sun was it wasn't overhead, so it was a little bit darker. There's more shadows, and I was telling her, I'm like, this is one of those places where I feel like I could see a Sasquatch just run across the road. A lot of times I'm the last person there, when I'm leaving at night. It's just me and the road. And
it does get a little eerie in there.
Yeah, it can. I've been hearing a lot of trees falling down too. I guess they're dry and they start falling down.
Yeah.
We got a winner.
Yeah. Already?
Yep. Perry.
Wow.
It's been a while. Congratulations. Yeah, Perry, get a hold of me. Send me your. I know she's due though. She's due. Send me your email address, Perry, and I will get a hold of Brian in the morning, and we'll get you taken care of tomorrow. He's usually pretty quick. So Let's see. Anything else anybody wants to talk about on here before we wrap it up? It's been almost 2 hours. It flew by. It's crazy.
It's good. We haven't done this for a while.
It's been a long time. I think it's been since February.
Times, but it's been that long? Okay.
Yeah. What's up, Jim? See Jim in here. Good to see you. I was going to ask you, did they ever reschedule the the Angler's Choice up there on La Crosse?
Oh yeah, the classic. It's in July. I don't remember. It's the 7th and 8th, or 8th and 9th, or it's usually a Thursday, Friday. You know, so guys go up there. They can pre-fish for a few days. The tournament's Thursday, Friday, and then they can go home on the weekend, depending on how far they have to drive. But we're not fishing it. It's just ended up being too much of a cluster, and it's a good thing they canceled it though, because at the time they had major flooding going on out there.
Here's a question for you, Ron. Favorite baits for the Mayfly hatch? Mike just experienced a major Mayfly hatch. He's fishing the Alabama.
Were you up north, Mike?
Yeah, no, he's fishing the team trail down there in the ABT down on the Smith Lake, I think he said. And he said it was like an oil slick when they were running across the lake. There were mayflies everywhere, and it made the fishing a little bit tough.
I've actually had to hit the brakes and slid across the road from so many mayflies on the road.
Jeez.
I don't know about. I got a feeling it's different down south than the way they act up north. My only experience is up north, Mike. So, but what we would throw up north is usually the hair jig, the marabou. Like a 1/8 or 1/16 ounce. They just call it the fluff, is what everyone calls it. But and then you just reel it really steady, and those fish are slurping on. You can see them come up. They're slurping on the mayflies, but it can be tough when they start slurping on those mayflies. It can be tough. Is there a spook? Sometimes we'll get those fish to go, but for us, the little hair jig was the most consistent. And really what you wanted to do, what's interesting is when you get on a big body of water, most of the insects and stuff, they actually have a life cycle that involves the bottom of the lake. And then the larva comes off the bottom and they come up to the surface and they hatch, and then it's a mayfly or a midge or whatever type of bug we're talking about. But on these big lakes, like Mille Lacs or wherever, you'll be going down the lake, and you know how we'll see shad on the graph? I was out there one time when I first got up there, and I saw this big ball of stuff. I didn't know what it was. I was like, is that bait fish? And it was everywhere, and it was down like 10 or 15 feet deep. Well, it was the larvae. They were starting to come up out of the mud, and it was a larva coming up. And of course, all the fish in the frickin' planet were, at that depth that larva was at. And the good fishing on the mayfly hatch, if you could pinpoint those balls of larvae as they were coming up off, and they take several days from the bottom they just don't pop up to the surface. That's really when you could take advantage of the mayfly hatch, so to speak. The window of opportunity was really before you actually started seeing mayflies on the surface. Once they got on the surface and they were slurping, they can be really tough. Matter of fact, today, Edwin Evers posted a video. They're on St. Clair, and apparently they had a mayfly hatch. And he's on his video that he posts all the time. He's like, I could see 5 hunters eating mayflies all around me, and I couldn't get them to bite. So that's a common thing that can happen. And I would think like a floating fly or someone had a fly rod or something would actually catch some of those fish to go. But we would just cover water with that hair jig. And of course, if you see some on the surface, there's some right below them. And that hair jig, we could usually catch some fish. But
yeah,
that's
I bet
I don't know.
A black woolly booger, which is a fly that is pretty common to fly fishermen, like in a size 14 or 16 would be lights out. It's similar to the hair jig, but probably just a little bit smaller.
Yeah.
Would be lights out.
That old float and fly, I don't know why that's never really taken hold in a tournament setting. Because the bobber provides the weight. You can cast it on fairly regular tackle. I don't know if that would work. I've never tried to deal with it down south. I do know I'll let out a little nugget for anyone that fishes Kentucky Lake. That little hair jig will catch fish on Kentucky Lake. Buddy of mine that's from Mille Lacs fished on the Monticello, I think it's called, fishing team down in Alabama. And they had a college event on Kentucky Lake. They were struggling, and they were fishing some of those gravel bars on the east side of Kentucky Lake. Like, well, I wonder if they'd hit this stupid thing. So he started throwing I think he was throwing the fighter fly, I think, but doesn't matter. It's just a black hair jig, marabou, and smoked the smallmouth on Kentucky Lake doing that. So it does work other places than up north.
And they have a big mayfly hatch down there too. So
I'm sure they do, yeah. But I don't think this was associated with the mayfly hatch. The fact that little marabou jig was catching fish on Kentucky Lake. So
I need to throw a couple of them in my co-angler bag.
Yeah, I've messed with it a little bit around here. I've got crappie to bite on a white one. I was on the first year in 2000. BASS for their Angler of the Year tournament came to Mille Lacs in 2016 and 2017. 2017 was when Brandon Polnick won his first Angler of the Year. So anyway, most of us guides decided we weren't going to take clients that week they were there, because we didn't want to. If I had clients, I was going to go catch fish. People are paying me money, so. But I didn't want to be in that quandrum of getting in their way, so I didn't guide that week. I got to work the expo, which was cool. But I kept running just by chance. I kept running into Randy Howe while he was during their pre-fishing days. And we would chit chat a little bit, and he'd say, I was on the tip of Miramar, and he pulled up. He thought it was a tournament boat. He pulled up and said, "Hey," and he goes right away, "You can't tell me anything. You can't tell me I can't get information from you. But I can watch." That's what he said. You can't tell the guys to close their eyes. So that's anyway, funny. I was catching fish on a hair jig. I was on the tip of Miramar catching fish on a hair jig. And all you do is you throw this thing out as far as you can on light tackle, and you just reel it back really slow. Montevello, yeah. It's Tyler Barr who it was, Bass. Anyway, you just reel this thing in real slow. You don't impart any action to it. And he's like, whatever. So he takes off. So the next day, we had east wind the next day. That damn east wind up there is prevalent all the time. So I'm over on Agate Bay on the east side. I don't know, did we fish the bowling pins together?
I don't know. I don't remember that.
Pins that run down the bank. All right. Well,
I don't remember that.
It's one of the areas on Mille Lacs. We call it the bowling pins. Anyway, I'm on the bowling pins throwing a hair jig. And this boat's coming like 80 miles an hour, and it's Randy Howe. And he shuts down right next to me, and he stands up. He goes, "Dude, I just caught a 6-pounder on a hair jig. It was awesome." It was his first fish he'd ever caught a hair jig, and he sped off. It was hilarious. So those guys are no different than us. They get excited, and that hair jig's kind of a unique deal up north. And anyway.
You just throw that on an 8-pound test, fluorocarbon?
Yeah. You drop normally I would throw a 10-pound braid. Like if I'm throwing a Ned rig up there, I'd throw a 10-pound braid with either 8 or 10-pound fluoro. With that, you want to drop your braid down. I like that V2 stuff. It's high strand, and that super slick.
Yeah.
Drop that down to 8-pound test on the braid, and that would really help casting wise. And then usually with 8-pound fluoro leader on it. But the braid, this thinner braid, it does make a difference going from 10 down to 8 on that braid as far as casting distance. It's kind of like a crankbait. You want to throw it as far out there as you can, and just reel it. And there's zero feedback, and it's weird. But once you get on it, it's a freaking blast. And the other thing too is, like, you'll get them to follow a lot. They'd follow the bait to the boat, and if you see them follow, your instinct is, from all your other fishing you've ever done, is kill the bait, right? Let it drop, and let it want to drop. If you kill that bait, they'll just turn around and swim off 99% of the time. But if you see them following it, in that clear water, sometimes you can see them following it from a long way away. But you just slow it down a little bit, and then you'll see them kind of just disappear, and all of a sudden your rod just loads up. It's pretty cool.
That sounds fun.
Oh, it's a freaking blast, dude. It's a blast. When they're on it, it's a blast. And it's just fun. It's easy and it's fun, and anyone can do it.
Yeah. I got to catch one on it while I was there. I only caught one on it.
But yeah, you caught a few on it.
Yeah, I've caught 1,000 trout on a hair jig. I mean, that's one of my favorite ways to catch trout is like a 64th ounce marabou jig. We throw a light jigs, either a 32nd ounce or 64th ounce. Olive, black and chartreuse, white. Yeah, that's fun. Really, really. Of course, you're fishing with 4-pound test, so it's a little bit lighter, like an ultralight. So you can throw that really light jig out there, but it's fun. Like you said, there's no feedback. It's like fishing a crappie jig. There's nothing thumping or no vibration. It's just a steady pull, and then all of a sudden it just gets heavy.
If you're in a BFL at Kentucky Lake, and as many smallmouth are showing up in these tournaments at Kentucky Lake right now, I'd stick a couple of those old marabou jigs in your tackle box, and
I'm going to. That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Who knows? Don't take up any space.
No. I mean, I already got
I like that.
1,000.
Yeah.
I already got 1,000 things in there with 1,000 too.
Yeah. That VMC makes a good one. I used to throw one, I'd go a little heavier than a lot of guys. A lot of guys would throw 8th, 16th, 30 seconds, whatever. And Outcast Tackle has one. I think it's Outcast Tackle. It's called the Fighter Fly, but it's like $10. But VMC makes one that has a pretty good hook. And it's a little less expensive. One thing though, most of them come with, well, not all of them. I don't think the Firefly does, but a lot of them come with tinsel. Like that VMC one comes with tinsel. First thing you do is pull that tinsel out. Most of the time you don't want that tinsel in there.
Okay.
Take that tinsel out. You just want the fluffy of the marabou.
Okay. Yeah, I can tie. I'll just tie some up. I've tied a bunch of them. They're pretty easy to tie. I've got all the feathers and stuff and jig heads. So I just need to tie some up. That'd be fun. You never know, man. It's something they're not seeing a lot. And, everybody's
I know we need to wrap this up. You know how that marabou will undulate in the water?
Yeah.
Like this. Next time you find some fish that are under the boat, instead of drop shotting them or something like that, drop a hair jig down there and just like you're drop shotting.
Okay.
And see what happens. Hella bass. He must not like it. I like it. That hair jig that'll sit there and it'll just do this. And you'll be sitting there up north, next to a boulder or whatever, and all of a sudden you just feel tick. Everyone else is throwing a drop shot.
Rich is a closet hair jig fisherman. He's not fooling anybody. Trout fishing, you'd shake your rod tip, like when you're reeling in, you just shake your rod tip, and that thing would just do that.
That marabou's really supple in the water. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I think they used to make a Phil said, what was the name of the old Marabou underspin? It could have been a Roadrunner version. I
The
think
Horsehead
Roadrunner didn't.
one?
Yeah, I've got one in the box.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. Weren't those more of a bucktail hair though? Or no?
Yeah, they might have
Maybe I'm
been a
wrong.
little
I
stiffer.
don't remember.
Yeah. All right, let's wrap this up, man.
Right. Yes,
fun.
I could go down a rabbit hole. Keep talking. We're just talking fishing now. And it's, you can go, it's like I said, here till midnight and just talk fishing.
I used to throw that doll fly a lot, which was, you know, the doll hair, synthetic hair. It was called a doll fly.
Yeah.
Or that's what we used to always call them. And you catch the crap out of those fish on that thing. All that stuff still works. We just don't throw it anymore.
We just if something else comes out and you spin, you end up throwing a 6-inch whatever that weighs 18 ounces, and you know everyone's on that kick now, and it'll be something else next year, and it'll be something else year after that, and I'll have a garage full of all of it.
Yeah. Well, it's like this.
Part of the fun.
We'll wrap this up, but somebody asked what bait catches the biggest bass. Well, a lot of times it's whatever you throw the most of. I mean, a jig is notorious for catching big bass. Well, maybe it's because you threw that bait 75% of the time and you got it in front of more big bass, but you could have caught those same bass on a 7-inch power worm or a shaky head. You know, it's a lot of times it's not. Obviously, if you're throwing like an 8-inch swim bait or something, you know, you're going to catch bigger bass on that. But a lot of it is just having whatever bait you fish the most, you're going to come in contact with a higher percentage of larger than average fish. So that to you, that is the bait that's going to catch bigger fish. You know, there's some science to that, or some percentages to that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So,
all right.
I enjoyed it, buddy.
It was fun, man. I really appreciate you.
Yeah, if I can help anyone with one quick thing when you're fishing in the summer is turn the gain up on your down scan and find out where if you're like, it's not all lake stratify. If you're on a river, it doesn't stratify. But if you're on a lake that has a thermocline, turn that gain up on when you get in the boat, and you can eliminate half of the lake probably in about 3 minutes.
Phil's wanting an all-nighter. Yeah, so don't fish below the thermocline once it gets set up.
Yeah,
like you said,
it's probably not depleted of oxygen yet, but it will be.
Yeah,
every lake's so different, but it's just good to know where it is.
Yeah, and finding structure really close to that thermocline. If your thermocline's 15, like 12 to 15 right there, you find brush piles and stuff. That's going to be your higher percentage brush piles, or that break at the end of the point that drops off right there at that thermocline. You know, it's simple stuff, but that's just fishing basics 101 that can really make a big difference if you just focus on that little stuff like that.
Yeah, you eliminate a ton of water that way.
We got to go on this one. It's the third time you got called out. That's a hit.
A special order mine.
Yeah, it's a $300. You got to spend $300 to get the sleeveless version. It's about like Rich having the visor.
Yeah, Rich takes his hats and cuts the top of them off. I just cut the sleeves off my t-shirt.
What a weirdo. Wonder what does he do with the other part of that hat?
I don't know. I wonder if he saves them.
I bet he does. I bet it's they're like potholders.
That's what he makes a minnow seiner out of them. He's
up
north, so he's dipping minnows. He's making a minnow seiner out of it.
It's like a soft frisbee or something, so he doesn't, so you don't harm the kids. You know, we live in this cotton candy world nowadays, so you gotta have the really soft frisbee so nobody gets hurt.
Yeah.
All right, folks. Thanks for hanging out with us tonight. It was really good to spend some time with you. No stream next week. We got a holiday weekend, so happy 4th of July, everybody. And we will be back in a couple weeks.
Sounds good,
Till
buddy.
then.
Enjoyed it.
Yep.
Enjoyed